Well, welcome back, everybody. Excited to be here with all of you for day number 2 of Home ARP Supportive Services Program training. If you folks want to, please go ahead and put your name and agency in the chat for attendance purposes. And then simultaneously, we're going to go ahead and get started with our promise of community action. So join me, please. Community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. Thank you. I'm going to go through just a couple of quick reminders for us, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Henderson and Bridget from Housing Finance Agency, and Holly's going to chime in. So we're going to be hearing from everybody today. So just want to remind us, folks, remember that we do not know what we don't know. We are all learning together. That's the whole purpose of these trainings that we're working on. And just a few ground rules. Remember, we're doing this together as part of a team, right? We're practicing grace and kindness and patience. We are all here for the same goal. We're going to see success with our clients. Quick reminder of the Home ARP Supportive Services Program overview. This is going to be a new 2-year statewide program. We went over this in our last training, so I'm not going to review it in detail. But remember that we are going to be able to help folks with rental assistance, security deposits, rental arrears, first and last month's rent, utilities, moving expenses. And the big important message for all of us to remember is that this is going to be more resources for less people. The sooner we all are on the same page about that, the better. So just be mindful. We're not doing anything wrong. It's very intentional. We're trying to provide more resources for less people to help them into that realm of self-sufficiency. The policy manual is almost done. I think it's clocking in at like 67 pages or something like that. But it is coming soon to an email near you. We're going to dive into more policies on our training next Tuesday, December 10th. So just be mindful. Again, getting us all on the same page, helping us remember that that policy manual is coming. We talked about this last time, but we're going to remind ourselves that documentation is what it is. This is HUD funding. We're going to have to provide a lot of documentation, folks. And with that, we are also going to need to have data that is full of integrity, data that is good, data that helps us show the progress that clients are making. So documentation and data are very, very important to this. Remember, we are all learning together. We're going to take the month of December. This is the second of four total trainings that we're going to have. And then we're also going to have regular staff meetings. We're going to be meeting with case managers. We're going to be meeting with fiscal folks. So lots of opportunities for additional trainings and discussions. At the end of December, I promise you, you're not going to get a handshake and a good luck. We're going to just keep plugging away on this together. So we're going to do training today, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. We're going to come back on the 10th, and we're going to really dive into more policy discussion. And then we're going to come back that following Tuesday, the 17th, and we're going to talk more about the technology behind this program, the databases and SharePoint that are going to be involved with this program. Today, we're going to spend time learning about forms and documentation requirements. And Faith, if you want to go ahead and get that first poll published, we're going to get started, folks, and just getting a pulse on where we are all at with things. So please take a minute and fill out these questions that we all see on our screen. Awesome. We're seeing the responses starting to come in here. Good, good. A few more. And in just a second here, Faith will publish, but we have lots of different answers coming in. So make sure you fill those in. Faith, I think we're right at about where we should be with responses. So if you want to go ahead and publish those, that would be fantastic. All right. So, folks, have you had a chance to review the pre-training resources? All right. We're making progress on that. Fantastic. And I'll try to remember to put some of the links while we're together today in the chat, but you've been emailed this information. So I think we all know what our pre-training resources are and how to access those. So remember, we talked about this at the last training. We all play a role here, and you do have an obligation to spend time with those pre-training resources and familiarize yourself so we can really get started off on the right foot. All right, so Home ARP will serve more people with less resources. Good one, guys. That was a bit of a trick there. Good one. That's right. We're going to be serving less people with more resources. So good job. Home ARP will absolutely require case management for each participant. There's no getting away from that. There's no getting away from documentation, and there's no getting away from the data component. But all of these things are very, very manageable. And look at that. A lot of us are absolutely getting ready. We are ready for Home ARP as a network. Well, thank you, Faith. Thank you for sharing that. And Jen, I'm going to take my slides down and you should go ahead and start sharing your screen. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to turn it over to Jen. Jen Henderson. We have a lot of Jens on the call.
Always lots of gens on the call. Okay, so I want to see, let's see, Holly, wave your hands. Oh, there you are. This is funny when you guys are like that. It's a lot. You're so many people and such small little screens to find where the people are. Holly, you're prepared to talk about the perfect. Um, just a fair warning, Holly, you're gonna be up almost right away because your part dictates how the rest of these forms get filled out. So just a fair warning. Okay, I'll share my screen. It's been a busy week, guys, and I know you all have been just inundated with learning home ARP and reading and all of the materials that are coming your direction, and it's probably been a little overwhelming. Um, I just want you to know we all feel the same too. It's been a lot, and it's not our only jobs to learn this, right? So it's how do we fit all this in together? One of the things that I just wanted to make clear is, Andrea has said many times we're helping less people with more resources, and I wanted to provide a little insight before we move forward as to why that is. So one of the things that we have seen through the other programs, Emergency Solutions Grant and North Dakota Homeless Grant especially, and especially taking it over in 2023. So Department of Commerce, previously, when they administered the program, they had the program's ESG and homeless grant set at a maximum $50,000 award per organization. I don't know if any of you remember that. But what we quickly discovered is that doesn't go very far. If you give somebody $10,000, how many people can you help? And it was always help as many as you can. So what do? You give them maybe a security deposit and hope that's enough to help them along their way, and that Band-Aid doesn't stay on because it got wet and some other things happened, and all of a sudden they need help again and then again. And so um, our philosophy is a little bit different. Our philosophy is give organizations as much as we can for them to do a good job. We might be providing less organizations with money, but we're providing organizations with at least enough money to do the work that they need to do appropriately. Well, that also passes along to, okay, you've got the money to do the work, give the person who needs the help enough so that you're fixing all the things and setting them up to be successful instead of keeping them from the cliff for just a little bit longer, but not fixing what the issue is, which is trying to figure out how they're going to be able to pay for their bills going forward when this temporary assistance is done. Well, fix everything you can with the funding sources you have available so that it sets them up for success, and then they can move on to not have that assistance later. So that's what we're looking for, is we're looking for what is it going to take to help these individuals who are, you know, at risk of homeless and need supportive services, but it's time limited. So what can we give them to put them up on the right foot so that in the going forward, they can take care of themselves and they can be financially stable? And, you know, not everybody can be helped like that temporarily, but hopefully we can do enough good that we're moving people off of the need for this type of financial assistance in the future. So that's really what we're trying to do here. And you'll notice when we're funding ESG in the North Dakota Homeless Grant, we're going to continue to try to fund more better rather than, less better rather than funding everybody a little bit, because those little pots of money just are administratively burdensome. So you just can't do anything with $10,000, in my opinion. Okay, so let's get started. So we are today going to be going over the forms that are required in a participant file and just kind of looking at each of those forms, maybe do a practice filling out of a little bit of what we expect them to kind of look like. And hopefully you guys will just get a sense of how to do that. This here is the list of the forms that are required to be in a participant file. Every file needs a staff evaluation of the eligibility, which we'll look at later, release of information, an intake and assessment, housing plan, case notes, the qualifying population certification, the income documentation if it was required, self-certification if it's needed as part of the qualifying documentation. If you're providing rental assistance, financial assistance, you need that lease agreement and a rental assistance agreement. Reasonableness needs to be conducted, housing inspection. And so we're going to go through each of these and take a look at what every one of these forms is. And please feel free to raise your hand and ask questions along the way or put it in the chat so that we make sure we pause if there is a question on how this form needs to be filled out. And so with that, what I just want to stress is that record keeping is really important. All the records must be retained for a period of time. And those records should be one record. So don't have a paper copy, an electronic copy of the same record. Have a method of how you are going to keep your records so that they are accessible. And then that direction of how you guys are going to organize your records is going to come from CAPND. So we are not dictating to anybody how you guys do it necessarily. We want you all to be doing it the same, and that direction will come from CAPND's administrative manual when that comes out. So with that, we're going to try to go in order as much as possible of as you are helping a participant, what forms are probably going to come next and next and next. So with that, as mentioned to Holly before, first is intake and assessments. So somebody comes to your office and presents to you as either homeless or housing unstable. And so your job is to do that initial intake with them and assess their situation. So Holly, are you going to steal from me the screen? Okay.
Yes.
Should I stop share? Maybe? How about that?
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. All right,
Holly,
everybody.
Are you able to make it a little bigger?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm not trying to make it more difficult, but some of us can't see very well anymore. Thank you.
Yeah, that's okay. Um, okay, so I wanted to show you guys a few things that we're working on, and like I know this checklist is going to be like kind of overwhelming. But I wanted to show you because it's this checklist on your screen here is kind of the order of things we're going to do the intake in. But I wanted to show that like these three documents here, qualifying population certification, SFN 62530, and then the housing assessment I'm going to show you here. It's kind of either or. They kind of go hand in hand. You're not going to be able to fill out one without the other. So if you start with the housing assessment versus the certification, that's fine. Or if you start with the certification or the housing assessment, that's fine. Because you'll need both kind of when you're determining eligibility. Okay, so at first, we were going to use the CARES Housing Crisis Triage tool, and since it's not necessarily applicable to all regions, we kind of condensed it down to the relevant questions. So it's pretty self-explanatory. The italicized words will be, what you ask the client. It doesn't have to be super prescriptive. You guys know what you're doing. You know how to ask these questions. But the basics are like, do you need any alternative communication method, like sign language, Braille, interpreter or something? Then you go into, because that's going to help you. If they need sign language, if they need an interpreter, you can't really move forward until you get that, right? Okay, then you move forward. We need contact information, phone and email. If they don't have an email, that's fine, but like most people have emails these days, so we want to get that recorded. We have a spot here for if we have a second contact, like I can't get a hold of you, is there someone else we can contact? How many people are in the household? How many adults, including yourself? So we asked this question because there's HMIS documentation that comes along with each adult. So if there's two adults, then you need at least two HMIS adult forms. If there's any dependents, you need at least one, like you need a dependent form for each dependent. So that's why we asked this question here, and it will kind of like gauge you to, oh, okay, I need to remember to get two HMIS forms.
Can you just clarify, when we're saying dependents, is that 18 and under?
Yep, 18 and under, or I think people with a permanent disability and they need like a caretaker. Tom, I think you had your hand raised.
Shan, yeah, same
Okay,
question.
okay. This is
Holly, I have a question. So the ones
sure.
with the disabilities, if they're able to sign on their own, would they be considered the adult? Or do we have to have power of attorney?
Oh boy, that's a
I'm sorry.
um like if they're disabled and they can sign on their own or they can't.
Right. So if they're disabled and they're over the age of 18, are you requiring power of attorney paperwork or proof of that if they're unable to do that on their own?
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna say yes, but we're gonna flesh out the details when we get to that situation. I mean, I'm sure we'll have a situation that comes up, but when it does come up, let me and Andrea know and we can just go from there.
Perfect.
And
Thank
it
you.
might be too, because let's say you have a household that has a child that's 19 that lives with them and is going to school. That's an adult because they're 18 and over. And then two other adults that are, let's say, parents. So that household has three adults. And then any child under 18 would be the rest of that household. So, just keep in mind that if, you might be a dependent And maybe that's not the right word. If you're over 18, you need to fill out the adult version of that HMIS form. And I was kind of looking for Safari to make sure I'm right on track with that. And then the other form is child to fill out.
Yes. We might be tweaking the verbiage between dependent and child. We're still getting there. It'll all be defined in the policy manual. But the big thing about dependents slash children is they have to live with the head of household or the household at least 50% or more of the time of a given year to be considered in the household. So they can't, like, if I have my kids only every other weekend, they're not going to be able to be considered in the household. Okay, then we get into what is the total amount needed to resolve your crisis? Like if they're going to be homeless, if they're homeless when they present to you, you might not know this. That's okay. That's why it says if applicable. We get into these next questions are based on income because we know how important income and assets are for HUD and making sure we cross all our T's and dot all of our I's to make sure we're not missing out on any income. So do you have any expected income in the next 12 months? Yes or no? Have you been hired or start a job soon? Have you been approved for a regular reoccurring benefit that will start soon? So that would be like if you were approved for Social Security retirement or SSDI or something like that. Because this is a tool for you guys. This isn't a HUD form. This is a tool for you to gather all the necessary information. So then like it prompts you to do other things. Like, oh, if this is a yes, then that prompts me to submit verification that we need. Laura, what's up?
This might have been covered and I missed it, but when we are getting income verification from them, do we go by gross or net?
Yeah,
It is gross income.
that's what I thought. Okay. All gross income, no deductions. More income questions. This is about sources of income. There's a lot of questions on here because some people might not think that like their Etsy account or their Venmo account counts towards income. So we're trying to just have like catch all. So like Mary Kay, Tupperware, Pampered Chef. Maybe they do those things and then they wouldn't have thought it was income, but we're going to ask those questions. And now we talk about assets because remember we got to calculate assets. So again, this is kind of like a catch-all to, well, maybe you don't think you have assets, but do you have any gambling winnings, lottery winnings? Because that counts. Do you have any real property, like a house, a building, annuities? That counts. Okay, Nika said, is temporary income like from day labor also included as regular or expected income? How was that calculated since we have to calculate for future anticipated income? You would have to take like the average amount. So what have they been getting for average amount? Have they been working 2-3 days a week unusual? Okay, that's going to be your anticipated income. If it's going to be like super sporadic, then we have to use what the documentation tells us.
Yeah, so sometimes you can get a printout from the day labor that shows you the amount you earned the day and the number of days. And you can actually use a days calculator to put in that period of time. You know, let's say it was from February 4th to the end of March. You can use the days calculator to determine how many days that covered, and then the total amount that was earned over those days, and then annualize that. As long as they continue that they're planning to continue to be a day laborer. If they say, I'm not doing that anymore, then have them certify that I am no longer going to be a day labor worker because I'm doing something else, or I'm going to discontinue doing that because I got a job somewhere else. So there has to be a reason why they're discontinuing the day labor. By the way, it's just if they say I'm not going to do that anymore because they're worried about their income, well, then how are you going to pay your bills? Next is your next question. So just note on that. But yes.
And a lot of these situations are very like one-off situations. A lot of the times we're gonna have very similar, like pay stubs, benefits letters. If you run into like the CPD calculator is intimidating. It's intimidating to me. So it's probably intimidating to you guys. But like, so if you got questions and you're like, I don't know, I don't know what to do here, just please ask. It's better to ask before you do it than to ask forgiveness. All right.
Holly, I also put the incomes and exclusions documentation back in the chat again, so folks feel free to grab those there. Those were also disseminated via email along with the training for the CPD calculator. Because you're absolutely right, Holly, it can be a lot.
It's just a lot because it's something new. We're gonna get used to it though. Some of you guys probably are like, I got this, like the back of my hand. But the rest of us will get there. So yeah, this is also just like a prompt to like, if you answer yes to any of these, we need documentation. Then if you guys are familiar with SSVF, I will always take forms from SSVF, and this is one of them. This is our resources and referrals page. So again, this is a tool for case managers to use to connect people to the right resources. Because like Jennifer said, we want to help more people or less people with more funding. So then we don't have to see them ever again. We don't want them to be coming through our doors year after year because that's not self-sufficient. That means they're dependent on us. So these resources and referrals are actually really important because if you give people resources and referrals, hopefully when the next time a situation comes about, they know how to fix their own situation instead of having to come to community action. When you fill out this form, I'm just asking you to ask the household about these specific prompts on the side here. So like I have a client come in, well, do you need any help with employment and educational services? Well, like maybe job service, voc rehab, career counseling, adult learning center. Some of these might not be applicable to your client. If they're not, just write not applicable. But if you leave it blank, it looks like you didn't ask and it looks like we're not doing our job. So you can't just leave these blank. So public benefits, like these are just prompts for you, like, oh yeah, I forgot we have this food pantry down the road that you could use, or yeah, you would be a good candidate for LIHEAP, those sorts of things. So go down the list with your clients to see if any of this is applicable. We got healthcare, mental health, housing services, personal finance planning and credit counseling. Not everyone has this in their region, but some regions have organizations that helps with credit counseling or budgeting. Maybe you can refer out, or if not, you can do it in-house. Legal services, childcare services. If there's no children in the home, obviously we'll just put not applicable. Services for dependents, personal and household supplies. So this is just a place for you to write it all down, to kind of remember resources to refer to. And if everyone remembers, this is kind of like the concept of whole family approach. We're trying to connect them to all the different aspects of their life so that, they're better connected, they have social and economic mobility. Okay, if you go through that last page, is something called circles of support. So the purpose of this worksheet is to help households find alternatives to assist their housing situation instead of using their community's homelessness response finite resources. Because if we just send someone into a call 211, 211 has finite resources. So if our client has people in their life that they can turn to, we want them to turn to them instead of using, federal dollars. If there are alternative resources available, assist the household with attaining those resources rather than using supportive services dollars. A lot of times our clients come to us and they already tried. That's fine, but some people might not have. So we're gonna go through this worksheet. Like, who in your circle can you always count on? Well, can they help with the situation? What's stopping them from helping from the situation? Then we move into sometimes friends, family, or acquaintances that sometimes help you. And then friends, family, or acquaintances from different areas of your life that who knows, maybe they might be able to help you. Who knows? Like, you just didn't think of them in that light, I guess. So that's what the circles of support is for, is to like, well, if someone comes in and they're like, well, actually, I forgot that I have my third cousin in town and I didn't ask them if I could stay there. Well, now you don't have to go into a homelessness shelter. Now you can be diverted to your cousin's house and not be homeless for a night. This will help you, so it's five pages. You'll then move into either the qualifying population certification form, which is tells you what category they fall in, or if you already did that, then you'll move into the HMIS forms. And we're not going to go through those forms right now, but I did want to show you goals. We're not going to go through goals right now, but like the goal sheet is going to be really, really important because we want to show, okay, they're working on their goals, they've progressed, and now they don't need our help anymore. They never need our help anymore. Maybe it's because of the goals and how we structured our goals. We will also be doing the matrix, the self-sufficiency matrix. We're not going to be doing it on paper, but I have it here just to show you guys we're going to be doing it in CAP 60. But again, this matrix is also just a tool for you to show where the client is at, like at intake. If they're scoring all below the prevention line, then this client is very vulnerable and very much in crisis. 30 days later, we're going to come back and do another one. If their score keeps going up, that means we're doing our job right because they're getting above the prevention line. They're getting to stable, to safe, to thriving. So this is kind of like the document that's going to show us with numbers how people are progressing upwards or downwards or staying the same. Faith is going to go over how to do all that in CAP 60 in one of these trainings in the next month. But yeah, what questions do you guys have on those? Makes sense? Pretty clear? Good. I tried to make it so it was less like duplicative. So if you run into like, well, you asked me the same question 5 times, let me know because we can edit these forms and make it more, client-centered, less duplicative.
Holly, I would also just reiterate that we're going to be, monitored by Housing Finance Agency, and the agencies are also going to be monitored from CAP&D. And it's really clearly spelled out in the manual that we're expected and required to make appropriate referrals for folks. And we feel really strongly that this form is this is the form that's going to kind of take you throughout the client's progress in the program. So just get as good of information on there as you can, because we'll keep going back to it again and again and again. Thanks, Holly.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. I really love that matrix part, and that you'll be doing it multiple times, and hopefully there'll be some sort of a report that comes out that says, hey, look, we got people from below the line to above the line, and here's the resources that worked well for these
Mhm.
individuals. And that's how we're going to use you to tell the story of a program like this works the way that you guys are trying to set it up. So,
I love the
Good.
matrix too. Yeah. It's a good
alrighty.
tool.
So, Holly, let's see. I need to go back to my screen. See if I can pick the right one here. So as Holly mentioned, the qualifying population certification is kind of that next document, right? That's one of the next things that you do, or you're going to be doing it in the meantime of that intake and assessment. So Andrea and folks, the forms that are to be used by the agencies will be in your shared drive. Is that right?
Yep,
SharePoint.
that is
Yep.
Oh,
Yep,
SharePoint. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to also just note that we have forms here, but you should always go to your SharePoint for your forms because that's your guys' process. But you're going to see me grabbing the forms that we've made from this website. And if you need to go back there and get them, they're here, but always go back to your SharePoint if you can. So the qualifying population certification, just wanted to show you all this as far as what it looks like. And it is a PDF fillable, so you can put the date of the completion. So super easy. And then based on what you do, determine that you just put a little X box in whatever section is applicable. And making
Jennifer,
sure.
can you excuse me? Can you enlarge that a little bit? I'm old and that's hard for. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I don't know if you guys know this, but if it is not big enough for you yet, you can actually on your screen zoom in yourself a little bit more. What that does is you are seeing what I see, but you're zooming in on what I've provided you. So it's kind of cool. But anyway, just note that each one of these boxes has the required documentation that should immediately follow the certification. And it is the source documentation that was used to prove that they meet that qualifying population definition. So pretty simple form on that one. Source documentation should directly follow. Always refer back to that documentation requirement resource. I think it's a helpful tool if you have questions. The release of information should be signed by each household member aged 18 or older. That is, in our manual. I'm not sure, are you guys having more releases than that? Or if they are an individual who might be disabled and having somebody speak on their behalf, you need another release of information. That makes sense to me. So follow your procedures on that. So I debated about where this staff evaluation of eligibility form should be in this process, because what this form is, HUD requires that each participant file has a summary of the types of assistance and amounts of assistance the household was approved for. When HUD monitored ESG CV program with the Department of Commerce, this was one of their findings, that there wasn't a consistent form in a file that said what that individual was qualified to receive assistance on and the amount of that assistance. And so this staff evaluation of eligibility form was created to say, here's the form that everyone is going to use to show that information. So it's somewhat of a newer form. It is used in ESG and North Dakota Homeless Grant. And you're going to see that in a lot of the forms that I talk about, we are taking from the ESG program and implementing it into home ARP supportive services. And the reason why is ESG, homeless prevention, and home ARP supportive services are pretty much the same, except for expanded populations. And I can't stress that enough. Like, it is very much They should have given ESG more money for us to do homeless prevention and expanded the eligibility to ESG rather than forcing us to make a whole new program, but they didn't. So here we are stealing from a program that exists to make our forms. So the amounts and the number of months approved should match lease agreements, rental assistance agreements, invoices, reimbursement requests. And if there are revisions to what the person is eligible for, you need to document that file. So what I mean by that is when someone is monitoring your file, whether it's CAPND or NDHFA as the oversight of the entire thing, what we're going to look for is we're going to see that staff evaluation of eligibility. It'll say what they were approved for, and then we're going to look for the reimbursement requests and the payments that went to the landlord or whatever was paid to make sure that that all jives back. So let's take a look at that form. So it is staff evaluation of eligibility, the program participant name. You can do your household name if you want, and the date that you decided that of what they were eligible for. So when does that occur? That occurs after you have done your assessment, determined their needs, you've completed income qualification, you've talked to them about, if it's prevention and they're housed already, what is their past due rents that you're trying to help them with? Did you determine that they should be qualified for 3 months rent plus 4 months arrears? What is it that's going to help them resolve their situation? As I mentioned, this is very much used by emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, homeless prevention, and McKinney-Vento. So one of the things that I don't think was made very clear is what is homeless prevention versus McKinney-Vento. So in home ARP, everybody can receive the same services, but what type of services they are getting depends on their housing status. So let me get the manual here. There is somewhere in this, and I'm not going to go and dig for it, but if you are not housed, you are receiving McKinney-Vento. If you are housed, you are receiving homeless prevention. That's the difference between what types of services. So when you determine your qualifying population certification and what their situation is, that will then determine if you select homeless prevention or McKinney-Vento. It's one or two. So if they are homeless, do not have a roof over their head that you're trying to prevent them from being evicted to, McKinney-Vento. If they are housed and you're trying to prevent them from being unhoused, it's homeless prevention. So this is where you're saying what resources you're going to provide. So let's say it's 3 months of assistance and their current rent is $650 per month. How about I type right? And you're going to cover months January through March. That's all you have to put there to say that you are covering 3 months for the months of January through month at $650 per month. Let's say they have arrears. Uh-oh. There we go. And you've gotten a hold of the tenant's ledger. You need that ledger from the landlord to show what type of arrears exist so that you can show that you're not paying more than 6 months of arrears. So just a reminder that arrears is limited at 6 months. Cannot pay more than 6 months. And so let's say their ledger shows that they are behind September, October, November, and December. That's 4 months, right? So 4 months of rent. Now, there could be some late charges in that total amount of past due. So that would be included in the 4 months of arrears cost. So let's say it was $650 per month. And there was $100 per month of late charges. So let's say their ledger was $3,000. And that covered month September through December plus late charges. That's easy enough there. Oh, doesn't like that. So my form is being a little fuss buckety. Why is it doing that? Because something happened to this thing here that is automatically converting it. So I will be fixing this, guys, but the number 3,000 should be there. You probably can put the details here. There. So we do want this to somehow, that is hilarious. Wonder why it's giving me that silliness. There we go.
Oh, it looks like you fixed it maybe. I don't
I
know.
will be playing around with this because it was not doing this the other day. So what happened here is beyond me. But anyway, what we want you to show, and I promise this will get fixed, that we want to show that it's 4 months, the number of months that you're covering, September, October, November, and December, plus your late charges, and then the total cost. You'll see here that the amount per month didn't stick in here either, because I think it was upset about the dollar sign that I had out here. So we'll do that to make it work. But we want to show what months are you paying, what's the dollar amount that you're paying, and that is what was approved to them. Now, if they have legal fees are allowed for arrears. Sometimes they show up on the tenant ledger. Sometimes they're in the court order eviction. There should be kind of a combination thereof, but the total cost of the legal fees that are resolving their problem would be put here. I'm being really light on that cost, I know, because I've seen some of the legal fees that are being charged to individuals, and $1,500 is not even close to what I'm seeing. If you're paying arrears, same deal here. So if you're paying 3 months of arrears, if you're going to cover utility payments, same thing. So it should be about the same. So short-term rental assistance, I believe your policy is that you're going to cover 3 months initially, and then you might determine based off of their matrix that they still need to be continued to help because things are not resolving as quickly. What are we going to ask you to do? Well, you would complete an updated version of this. You would keep this in the file and you could do another staff evaluation of eligibility dated, well, you're looking probably at March, you might be visiting with them, or February to determine that you're going to continue the rental assistance a little longer. You'd complete another one of these. I'd make a note here, round 2 or extension or something that shows that this is the next evaluation of eligibility. But just make sure that there's proof in here of what you are approving them for, and if there's differences, that there is in a revised, amended, additional extension, whatever that needs to look like to reflect what that individual was approved for. If you are doing rental application fees, security deposits, first month rent, any of these things should be clicked here as well. $500 is way too much for that, but you get the picture. this here is your kind of, what else are you referring them to? Are you doing case management, housing stability? Yep, I would probably see that checked on every one of yours, that you're providing housing stability, case management. If you are also covering any other things or referring them to something, that's what you would just check that here of any
Jen?
other services. Yeah.
Jen, what's the difference between the case management and then the housing stability case management?
So the housing stability case management, I would refer you to the descriptions in the administrative manual when it comes to, sorry to dizzy you, the types of services. They are all arranged here. So housing search and counseling services includes developing an action plan, housing search, counseling, securing utilities, making moving arrangements, blah, 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 blah. Case management is individualized services that includes even developing and securing, coordinating their services. So if you're getting them to, let's say, an addiction counselor or something like that, that would be in this area. So definitely refer to these definitions here to see where it fits. Mediation, credit repair. So all of these other services here, if you are providing any of those, they should be marked on your staff evaluation, and they follow verbatim to the order in our manual as well. You can also talk about where you referred them to the other mainstream benefits in this form. So very open to make notes of what you did here. You do sign this as the staff who worked on it, print and sign and date. But it really is that you determined that they meet the eligibility, and that is that form. Are there any questions on the staff evaluation of eligibility form? And you'll have to help me because I cannot see a lot of the screen anymore. So if there's people that have raised their hand, I wouldn't see that.
You might have mentioned this, but is this something that, let's say you're going to do the short-term rental assistance, but then after the 3-month, recertification, you're going to do some more months? You keep adding to the sheet, or you have to do a whole nother one?
We would probably, I mean, Holly and Andrea, what's your policy? I mean, I think you would do another one, right? Because you're doing another evaluation. So you'd have this one that was dated in December. Let's say come February, you're seeing that they're not quite ready to go off of rental assistance. So you'll do a new one that has 3 months. You'll change this to be April through, June. This is gone. All of this is wiped out, right? And so we have short-term rental assistance to continue. We have a new date. I said you were in February. Ooh, that's going to be hard for me to type some days at 2025. And I would probably note somewhere on here that this is a re-eval. That way you know it's the second version of it. Or extension. What's the word that you guys are going to prefer?
I'm going to let Holly answer that one, what word she prefers, because we keep going back and forth on this.
I'd say extension, yeah.
Yeah, we're good.
Whatever that looks like, but your first one, it's okay to give them more because that's what you determined. I wouldn't modify your original one because it was based off of another evaluation, right? You gave them a score or something, we've got case notes that reflect that their situation isn't improving. So it just naturally makes sense that we'd have another one of these showing more assistance provided. Any other questions?
Jen, I think I would want to add too that form that the staff evaluation of eligibility, that is what is compared to the TFAs that are issued. So those dollar amounts and everything need to jive and be copacetic. And we'll talk more about that, over time, but I want to make sure that that's pointed out right away. And then I was scrolling through, I have limited views to Jen, but Sarah Hasbargen, did you have your hand up?
Jen answered it. That was the question I had. So we're good.
Perfect. Okay, good, perfect. Thank
I was
you.
just going to add too that is something on the fiscal side. I look at this as well, like you said, that rapid rate housing, the homeless prevention for the coding internally as well. So I always appreciate that one, that form.
Hey, that's so great.
Spoken like a true fiscal person.
Gold star comment. You like that
Gold
form.
star comment.
I have a question before we move on.
Yep.
And when we do this reevaluation, would you redo the self-sufficiency matrix at that time or before then? Or do we have a different schedule for when that matrix would be redone?
The matrix will be done at the intake and then we'll update it every 30 days, but this staff evaluation will be done at the intake.
Other questions? Should we move on to the next form?
Nika has her hand up. Nika, your question in the chat, we've acknowledged it on our end, and we're just not ready to answer that right now. We're not ignoring you, but we're putting things together, and I promise we'll have an answer for you.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the forms that are going to now be related to those providing rental assistance. So one of the forms that's required is an inspection form. So every unit that receives rental assistance must be inspected. Trying to bring this over here. That is the same as emergency solutions grant. And even if you're paying arrears only, you still have to inspect the property. No, you don't. I think the question is, if they are living in the property and you're trying to prevent them from being evicted, do you still have to go in and inspect it because they're already living there? And the answer is yes. So I want you to know, if somebody's living in an apartment complex that doesn't meet the inspection standards, you actually should be trying to help them find a different place to live, quite honestly, because it's not meeting the minimum standards. And these minimum habitability standards is required before assistance can be provided to that unit. So it's kind of a bummer if they are living somewhere and they're not that interested in moving and this place doesn't pass inspection. That's a problem. The inspection form is different than emergency solutions grant. And this is because they chose to fund home and not emergency solutions grant. So the emergency solutions grant requires the words minimum habitability standards. That is not what home requires. Home requires them to meet housing quality standards, similar to that of a housing choice voucher. So what we are doing is using the safe harbor of the housing choice voucher program's inspection checklist in order for you to meet that obligation. This is a long form of the inspection, and the reason why this form is been made available to you is it provides instructions, which I think would be helpful because it helps you to know how you're supposed to answer these questions. So this second page talks about the living room. Is there a living room present? Is there electricity, hazard, security? At some point, you will not have to read this whole document over and over and over again. But quite honestly, this form is going to be helpful for you as you're initially getting used to these types of inspections. You do need to know the year that the property was constructed and the number of sleeping rooms. I'm not going to go through each of these individual things because I do hope that you read this document before you go to somebody's place to inspect it for the first time. Definitely become familiar with this. But on this part here, it talks about, and again, these questions are kind of nice because they're longer, but is there a living room? Yes. Are there at least 2 working outlets? And so you can see here that you can just X, you can type comments if you have a failure. Is there a way for them to fix anything before so that they can correct this inspection? Same thing with the kitchen. There's all kinds of descriptions on what should be there. Food prepping space. Are the windows accessible from the outside? Can they be locked? Is there a sink? Does it work? Does it have hot and cold water? So again, if somebody is currently residing in a property that has failures in these items, you cannot pay financial assistance on that property. And so your pivot would be perhaps to find them a different place to live, or you're not going to be able to help them pay their rent. So sorry, that's just the rules. It's everybody, I can't see hands, so I'm just going to ask hands to be put up, and Andrea can tell me, but who's familiar with this type of form? Seen it before? I can see Denise raising her hand. Thank you.
Just a handful of folks, Jen.
So a majority of everybody on here, this is a brand new thing, never seen it before. Is that right?
I think
Yes.
that's fair.
Yep. Okay.
And this is the HQS, right? Housing
Yep.
Quality Standards. For a lot of, I mean, not a lot, other programs use housing habitability, but there's differences. So you can't say that they're the same thing. HQS and then the housing habitability are different.
They are different. The habitability form is super simple. So somebody that could be helped with ESG, by the way, might not be able to pass HQS. So it could be that they have been previously helped by Emergency Solutions Grant, and then this program can't help them. It has to be meeting this HQS standards. Now, bonus is that Housing Choice Vouchers, which is the permanent rental assistance program ran through the local housing authorities, uses HQS. So if you are working with somebody who maybe it has been determined that getting them onto permanent rental assistance is a good plan for their future, then you would help them apply for that assistance, and hopefully because they've passed your HQS inspection, that'll help them qualify for housing assistance through the voucher program. Now, can people make judgments that are different? Yes, that happens. I hope that we don't come across an argument that we said it was okay under home ARP and then they can't get through HQS through the housing authority. If that ever happens, let's pause and have a conversation. But anyway, that is this form. Let's talk about how you fill out this first part, because we're not a PHA. There isn't a tenant ID numbers. There's some things here, right? So what I want you to do is remember that this form is us using something that's for a different program, but we don't want to reinvent a wheel. So your name is here as the inspector, and the date of your inspection is here. Okay, the
Jen,
type of inspection, go ahead.
question, do we have to be an HQS certified to do the HQS form?
Nope, we're just using this form.
Okay.
I don't even think that's necessary. Okay, so this housing type is a low rise is 3 to 4 stories and a high rise is 5 or more stories. So primarily you are likely going to be in these two boxes here. But single family house that's a rental, a duplex living in one side of it, a house or a townhouse, what's the difference here? The single family detached is just that, right? It's a single family home. So a duplex is often owner occupied. So it's got the owner and then they rent out the other side. A house or a townhouse might be row homes connected and each different one is different owners or renters. So that can be a townhouse. It's not the biggest deal if you don't know the difference between a duplex or a townhouse. It's just that it's not single family detached. So feel free to mark whichever one is applicable here. Okay. The summary is if they pass or fail and the number of bedrooms in here. So that's about it. Is there any other questions on this form? Like I said, the directions are pretty good here to say how you should be answering things. Just do your best.
So I
Okay,
don't see any hands raised and I don't see anything else in the chat either.
okay. So again, any financial assistance, rental assistance, security deposit, arrears, utility payments, deposits, anything must be inspected, even if they're already living there. Okay, let's talk about the lead screening worksheet. Did you have folks attend the lead-based paint visual inspection training already? Was that a prerequisite?
Yep, it was. Yep, we
Okay.
had a majority of the folks on this call have already completed that. And if they haven't, it was sent to them and they know they need to complete it.
Okay, great. So a lead screening worksheet is a way for you to ensure compliance with lead-based paint requirements. It's more of a flow chart. It should be done on for every unit that you're providing financial assistance. Okay. So your the recipient name, project name, and then your client name. So the recipient name is CAP-ND, and you might need to do CAP-ND and then region, and then your CAP agency name, right? Because in my mind, you're our recipient, which is CAP-ND, right? But then each of the individual organizations has their own. So if you do it like this, that would work just fine. The client name, the address, city of the project. So the unit that they're living in is what goes here. Your name as the person completing it, signature, and date. Now, interestingly enough, I see here that I've got some old language that I didn't catch before, but we had sign only if you have completed a visual assessment. What I mean by that is signing down here. So this part here is the visual assessment certification, and this signature on this part is only needed when you conduct a visual certification. So that form was updated in September and I failed to see this line until just today. So please make sure you sign here no matter what as you are completing this, but the bottom signature is if you are doing a visual assessment. Again, this is meant to help you determine whether or not you have to do a visual assessment and whether or not lead-based paint is required. So the first question here is, was the leased property constructed before 1978? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, next question is, will a child under the age of 6 be living in the apartment? And if the answer is yes, we have 2 yes answers. If the answer to both of these questions is yes, then a visual assessment is triggered for the unit. Continue to part 2. So then you go to part 2, which talks you through some additional exemptions that may be applicable with lead-based paint. And those exemptions are if it's a 0-bedroom or single occupancy room. I'm going to answer no. I'm going to answer no X-ray. Has the property had all lead-based paint identified and removed accordance with HUD regulations? That is a question for the property owner or manager. If they've had any lead-based paint abatement completed, they must provide you with that information. And if they can't, your answer is no. Is the client receiving federal assistance from another program which has already undergone a visual assessment? So if they have the federal assistance from another program where they may have gone under a visual assessment is if they receive rental assistance, which then you might not be helping them. So it is very much likely that you could be a no for a majority of your people because your Section 8 vouchers, if they're already receiving assistance, unless they've lost that assistance at some point, then maybe it could be a yes. So if the property, if you answer yes to any of the following questions, the property is exempt. If you answer no, then you must continue to the next step, which is your visual assessment. So this is that training certification that you've already completed. This also triggers you to conduct the visual assessment form. So that is this guy right here. So your lead-based paint visual assessment is walking you through the steps to do that assessment. And again, it's going to ask you if the property was built after 1978 and the year the property was built. Because you might end up getting to your exemption if you answered any of those questions incorrectly before. So again, this is more of a duplication of the questions that you've already answered in that worksheet that led you to this visual assessment. I'm not going to go through what a visual assessment should look like, but you simply just answer these questions as you are doing your inspection. So lead-based paint and HQS inspection, they are hand in hand. Please find the date, the year the property was built, because that will help you to determine your lead-based paint requirements, which if you're triggered to do a visual assessment, you should do it at the same time you're doing an HQS inspection. Reminder, if the property is built before 1978, lead-based paint is applicable, and you must provide your tenants with the lead-based paint disclosure. So this is the disclosure that is completed for housing built pre-1978. Is there any presence of lead-based paint standards? And these are questions for the owner or the property manager right here. And then the client needs to acknowledge that they've received that. You also need to be providing them a copy of the pamphlet, Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. Andrea, those documents are going to be in the SharePoint?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Yep.
Perfect. You are the agent to acknowledge that you've informed everybody, and then everybody signs this. So property managers, properties built prior to 1978, they need to be able to provide some information here, if they have any records or not. Everybody has to be part of that. Any questions on the lead-based paint?
I'm not seeing anything, Jen. Holly, I don't know if you're seeing anybody's hands up. I don't want to miss anybody. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Okay. I will move on to rent reasonableness. So any unit that is provided financial assistance must meet both fair market rents and rent reasonableness. In order to conduct a rent reasonableness test, you must know what utilities are being paid by the tenant or will be required to be paid by the tenant. We must obtain a current utility allowance from the applicable housing authority. And if you are only providing a rental application fee or security deposit, it does not apply. I don't think that's going to happen too often with you guys because, again, we're trying to help more robustly. But if it does, keep that in mind. So I can't remember where we left the conversation of utility allowances and if somebody was going to try to obtain some of those in advance and put them in SharePoint. Where did we land with that?
Say it one more time, Jen. I want to make sure that we're answering correctly because I want to make sure I'm not confusing this with something else.
Yep. So I've got a copy of a Cass County utility allowance on the screen here. Can you see it, right?
Yep.
Okay. So Cass County, super nice of them. They publish it on their website. So I went out and grabbed it. Not everybody does that. So Great Plains Housing Authority, Stark County Housing Authority, all the housing authorities have to prepare utility allowances. And what I'm asking is, how are you going to obtain utility allowances, or should each of the individuals obtain utility allowances that will be applicable, or what's the process going to be to make sure that individuals have access to these resources?
Said we were going to put it on SharePoint.
Okay.
Yes. Holly,
Perfect.
chime in on that at all?
Every housing authority, is it like the same utility allowances or is it like every county?
Counties.
It is by county.
Okay. Yeah, we can definitely put it on the SharePoint.
Mm-hmm.
It's not yet though, so
Good.
just
Work in progress.
Work in progress. Okay. So I went out and grabbed Cass counties because, like I said, they put it on their website. Very nice. I think that's the way everybody should do it, my opinion. So I decided that we'd probably go through an example of how to calculate a utility allowance. So let's say we have a family that their lease agreement says that they're going to rent a 2-bedroom apartment and that the tenant is responsible for paying heating, electricity, and there is electric water heater. So what that means is that those are tenant paid utilities, and that needs to be included in part of the gross rent calculation. So gross rent is the rent that the tenant has to pay, any non-optional fees, and their utility allowance that they're responsible for. The combination of that gross rent is what cannot exceed fair market rents, or the it must be part of the rent reasonableness. Okay. So in this case here, I said it was a 2-bedroom apartment paying heat, electricity, and electric water heat. So I circled the utilities that are applicable to that. And that total is $104. So on top of their monthly rent, their utility allowance is $104. So we've got heating, electric. By the way, I am in an apartment that is 5+ units. There is apartments that are 2 to 4 units. There can be a duplex, manufactured home, or a single home. So do make sure that you are using the appropriate utility allowance for the type of housing unit that person is trying to rent. So cooking is naturally required. Water heater, other electric, they are not responsible for water, sewer, or trash. But air conditioning, there is an air conditioning unit, it's electric, so that is going to be included in there. They have a refrigerator, kind of strange. So $104. So now that we know what the utility allowance is, we can start with the rent reasonableness form. So what is rent reasonableness? Rent reasonableness is a comparison of units in the area to ensure that the unit's cost is within market. And then there's FMRs. And an FMR is the fair market rent that is applicable for that county for the size of the bedroom. So let's go get a fair market rent. And I'm in Cass County. So here is the current fair market rents for a 2-bedroom for 2023. Is that funny? You see I'm in 24 here, everybody, right?
Oh, yeah.
We're just going to keep moving forward here. I just thought it's kind of funny because now it says 23 up here. We're going to use the most current one that they're giving us. Okay. Not sure what's going on here. I'll have to look at that. I'll provide you some information if I can figure out why this is being weird to me. So $911. Okay. So what did I say was a gross rent calculation? It is the tenant's rent plus their utility allowance, right? Plus any non-optional fees. What is a non-optional fee? Let's say that if they wanted to live in this apartment, there is a garage fee and it's not a choice. So everybody has this garage fee that they have to pay. Not that if you want a garage, it's $50 a month. It's everybody has a $50 garage fee. That is a non-optional fee. And so their rent plus that non-optional fee plus the utility allowance is their gross rent. And that's what we're comparing the rent reasonableness. So I had already said that the utility allowance that I calculated was $104 of the unit. And we are going to say that the unit is 5+ floors and that it is a 2-bedroom apartment. So the square footage, you can ask what that is. We're going to say it's a 950 square foot apartment. That is, an older housing. You've done the inspection maybe, or you kind of looked at it online a little bit. We could probably just say good. This is a neighborhood assessment. It's not really a big deal for you to fill this out, but you could say that transit is there if you wanted. Something like that. Not a big deal there. Amenities. So amenities is what's in the apartment. Do they have a dishwasher? Is there carpet? Is there parking? Is there anything? And that's probably good enough. Year built. Let's say 1981. There's utilities. So the rent we'll say is $650. Let's make this an even 700. Tired of math today. So that's $804 a month for rent. Okay. So handicap accessible, yes or no? That's, if it's an ADA. So this is again comparison with fair market rent part here. So it's kind of being done at the same time, which is the proposed contract rent is again $700. Utility allowance is $104. The gross rent, this is repeated. So the applicable fair market rent is the $911. So it passes that part, right? So we've got this step done. Now let's go and compare it to some other places. How do you find a comparable rents? Does anybody have some suggestions of what that might be? Any ideas of how you find some comparable rents to a unit in your neighborhood, in the neighborhood that this person's going to live in or the general area? Any ideas?
You could check Zillow.
That's a good one.
Apartment Finder.
Yep. Great. All yes. So I have started to really like the apartments.com. And the reason why is because it's got a cool tool. So sorry that I didn't remember to put this in the chat before, but I have an ESG resource for you all that I just threw into the chat. It's a little older, but it's pretty much follows how you should be conducting a rent reasonableness survey, and what rules are applicable to it, all of the things that we're going through right now. But ESG rules for this rent calculation is what Home ARP is following. So let's look for apartments in the vicinity of wherever I'm going to pretend that this apartment is living or is at. So let's say that I don't want to do pricing because I don't want to limit the return of information, but I do want to limit the return of the type of apartments. And that's just to kind of reduce how many is being presented over here. And I'm going to put it to an apartment. So you can kind of look at this to maybe provide some help here. I don't want to limit it to low income and restricted because again, I want it to return all of the things in the area because ultimately what you're trying to prove by this rent comparability study is that the unit that this person is living in is not more expensive than the rest of the market. Now, Holly had a really good question to me when we first started because she's like, we have to do FMR and rent comparability. That's dumb, or that's a lot of work, or how come you have to do both? Wouldn't fair market rents be comparable because they meet that standard? Wouldn't that be good enough? And the answer is maybe in a Bismarck or Fargo because fair market rents are usually under the market. But go to a community like Rugby. It could be that the fair market rent is over what the actual market is charging. So that's why HUD has required both of these standards to be met before you make payment on a unit. So Something kind of cool about this apartment finder. Now, I'm not saying this is the only thing that you should use. Definitely find what works for you. It's just been kind of cool for me, because I can draw a boundary. I don't know if I'm going to like drawing in downtown Fargo, but then it brings the comparables to this neighborhood. So let's say that person was living somewhere here in one of these apartments. You can then have some surrounding apartments pull up that are 2 bedrooms and pick some that would make sense to put in as comparables. So warehouse apartments, doing your best here, but we've got an 1,100 base price for 1,021 square feet. You know, that's definitely under, right? So we can put that address there, whatever that is. It's a 2 bedroom and it's 1,100 square feet. It's newer. It's same location. You can mark all the things. Now, if you can't tell anything about the year built, don't worry about it. You can say it's new or older. This one happens to say it was built in 1977. Kind of cool. We'll say that we've got utilities included here, some water, trash. And let's see if we can find what the rent would be. Boy, do I hope I picked, oh yeah, $1,100. So if you are somewhere that says call to ask us what the rent is, I'd find a different one to use as a comparable. Do your best to find information in these that's enough for you to complete this form without having to call anybody, okay? Now, if you are in a very rural community that doesn't have any comparables, I'll show you what to do next. We are not expecting you to call around if you don't have to, okay? So try your best to use what you can find to fill this out. So $1,100. And we're going to say the utility allowance is the same. So
What about like, if I don't necessarily know the square footage, could I, like, is that a need, or if I could just estimate?
yeah, so if the square footage isn't out there, you could say looks comparable. Okay. Kind of do your best with that. What I've seen so far on the apartments is it's pretty complete in here. So you can, if you wanted to, attach this printout to your rent reasonableness as your sources so that you have your comparables and where did you get your information, you can definitely do that. Rent reasonableness is anytime you are paying assistance, fair market rent and rent reasonableness is required.
I already asked you this question a couple days ago, but for everyone else, what if there's no comparable units in a tiny little town?
That's right. So one of the things, so again, rent reasonableness and FMR requirements do not apply when a program participant receives only financial assistance. So only financial assistance is rental application fees, security deposit, and initial payment of last month's rent, moving costs, housing search, things like that. But if you are paying for any rental assistance, then you must establish that comparables. So the next step is, what if there isn't any other comparables? So in a town, what was the town you told me? Because we looked at it. Was it Carrington?
It was
Yeah.
Carrington, yep.
So I had a veteran up in Carrington and I did not know what to do.
Not even on here. Let's go with this.
And Jen, while you're pulling that up, Nika and Tom are wondering, do we do rent reasonableness for when we're getting people into new housing? Or what if they already live there? Nika,
It must
if
be
I
done.
misunderstood your question, Nika, please chime in.
Rent reasonableness and fair market rents must be done on any unit that is receiving rental assistance. So even if they live there, if they live there and their apartment rent exceeds fair markets, they cannot be helped with this program. I did want to show you, like I'll answer your question here. But the rent reasonableness resource that I sent you has some ideas for rental housing data sources. So apartment.com, for rent, they've even still, the newspaper ads or things like that can also be used as well. So if there's absolutely no comparables, you can put in the thing that says no comparables. It's gonna be kind of rare that there isn't any existing rental units out there at all to compare to, but it could happen. I know in our allocation plan, we have some information on that as well. Let's see. So the proposed unit should be compared to 3 other units unless there are no comparable units available. So you must notate that there isn't 3 available. Looking at Carrington real quick, I found a couple that exist out here today. So I would say to do your best here. This is kind of a cool comparison on this one, apartment home living. So see what you can find. They spread out though to other communities. So what I want you to know is that you should stay in your community. Do not compare a Jamestown rent to a Carrington rent. It should be in the community that that person is trying to live. So if there really is nothing, I would do a printout here that showed no apartments and attach that to your rent reasonableness. But what's your second thing that you have to make sure that apartment meets? Rent reasonableness and fair market rent. So there's 2 tests in order to provide rental assistance that need to be passed, plus the test of housing quality standards and lead-based paint. Are there any other questions about rent reasonableness? Hearing nothing, let's go to rental assistance agreement.
Jen, really quick before you do that, I want to make sure that everybody has looked in the chat because we went through and ascertained who still needs to complete the lead paint visual assessment training, and there's quite a few names. So if you folks could please just prioritize getting that completed and getting a copy of your certificate over. I'm putting this in the chat again, so it's current. So if your name is on that list, I need your certificate. If your name is not on this list and you're going to be doing this work and you're going to be interacting with clients, I do need yours as well. Reach out if you guys have questions. Thanks, Jen.
Yep. rental assistance agreements. Anytime short and medium term rental assistance is being provided, you must have a rental assistance agreement. Rental assistance agreements need to be signed between a landlord and the program participant. It is in addition to a lease agreement. So a lease agreement is great, you must have it, but you must also have this rental assistance agreement. And this agreement cannot be used in place of a lease either. So have to have both. Okay, rental assistance agreement. Bring you up over here. So instrument number, that is kind of a legacy thing of ESG. It's really not that applicable here. You just put your agency name, your address, city, state, zip code. Owner landlord information is, again, who is the owner landlord of the property name, the address, who the checks are made payable to, the address to send the payments if it's different than the address of the landlord there, and then on to the program participant name, address, the reason that they're requesting assistance, if they are currently homeless or if they are facing eviction, you can have a short explanation of that, and it's all kind of what was in your tenancy information that you collected already. Term of the agreement is the date that this agreement begins. And then rental assistance information. So again, we're doing home ARP, McKinney Rental, or homeless prevention. What's the difference? Homeless prevention means that they have been living there. McKinney Rental is that they are homeless. So you select one of these. So if you're doing housing relocation and financial assistance, so housing relocation and stabilization services, again, are that housing search and placement. You're likely going to be checking both of these all the time. So rental, anything that you're paying gets put in here. So the housing stability case management and housing search and placement, these should not have a dollar amount, but if you are providing a dollar amount of the legal services, credit repair, things like that, this all should match exactly what you completed on this form. So your rental assistance agreement section here should look very similar to what's here. I am noticing that this here should be X's instead of dollar amounts. So you can just do this for now until we get this fixed. So we will fix this part here. This is what happens when we don't use things right away when we have them redone. Short-term, medium-term rental assistance. It's always going to be tenant-based. We're not providing project-based rental assistance. That project-based rental assistance is because ESG and North Dakota Homeless Grant users can use this as well. So tenant-based is always your checkbox. This is the amount of assistance for how many months. If you're paying arrears, for how many months. There's late fees. Now, reminder or question maybe, can you pay late fees on regular current rental assistance? Can I get people to put an answer in the chat? I see Sarah. Thank you. No, nobody, nope, nope, nope. Late charges are only allowable for rental arrears. Also to note, renter's insurance is not an allowable fee for HUD programs. I don't know why. HUD does not like renter's insurance. They will not allow it to be paid. renter's insurance cannot be paid. That is why getting a copy of the tenant ledger is so important. If there are fees on there that are not allowable, all we got to do is highlight or show the dollar amount being paid and that it doesn't include those fees that are not allowed. So it is okay if the renter's insurance shows up on their ledger. We just have to make sure that the total amount due plus the amount that you're paying is not including that renter's insurance. Cost share. Remind me, there is no cost sharing for participants. Yes?
There will be, yes, there will be.
For months past number 3.
Yes.
For months past 3. Okay. So what do you do if you are committing to 3 months and this rental assistance agreement is completed, right? And then, so you, at that time, you would put no, right? What happens if you decide to extend this agreement?
We'll either have a new agreement or
Update it, amend
Update.
it.
Update this one. Yep,
Mhm.
agreed. So what I'm going to ask is if the cost share part or anything on here is just updated, make sure to leave it as it was and write notes next to it. So for example, I would put something and I would edit this document and I'm not in my editor mode, but let's say I can type on here or I handwrite it if you have a paper document and then scan it in. But I'd note on here, you know, effective February, extended coverage, and then participant needs to pay X dollar amount through February through March or something like that. Here's the checklist that makes sure that you are following things. And I'm seeing that a part, yes, HQS is here. There we go. So did they meet the eligibility? Yes. Do you have the elements of HQS? Habitability is for ESG, so HQS is for this one. Have you been entered into HMIS? Supporting documentation in the file. If you've answered no to anything, you might have a problem, just a note. And then this does need to be signed by all parties. Rental assistance information here needs to match the information on the staff evaluation of eligibility. That's probably the biggest key that I want to get across to you guys is that rental assistance agreement and the evaluation of eligibility should match.
And Jen, I would also add that needs to match your TFA requests that you're submitting to your fiscal office as well. So
Yep.
fiscal should be getting copies of these, and if there are discrepancies, then you guys got to figure that out.
Okay. Have a lease agreement. That's all I'll say to that because that's not our form. Pet deposits. So you cannot charge a pet fee for an emotional support animal.
But if it's not an emotional support animal, we cannot pay pet rent, we can't pay pet deposit, we can't pay pet anything.
Yep. And also, if you're asking if it's a non-optional fee, you do have an option, unfortunately, to not have a pet. So a pet fee is not a non-optional fee. It's their choice to have a pet and is not part of the gross rent calculation if that's what's being asked as well.
Even if it's a support, right?
If there's a support animal, you cannot be charged a pet fee.
Correct.
Legally.
Correct. Yep. All right.
if you have a pet, it is not part of gross rent because it is optional to have one. Even though in my mind, it is not optional. I think I like my dog better than anybody in my family, and he is the first one that will come with me anywhere. So for that, I know pets are extremely important. Oh, thanks, Faith. Please check your chat if you have questions about assistance animals. Yep, exactly. Files should have all copies of the invoices paid on behalf of the client in the file. So that's services costs. So if you're paying anything on behalf of the client, that's an allowable service cost under home ARP program. Those invoices should be retained in that client file. Your fiscal will also have those invoices attached to the reimbursement. What should happen when a monitoring is occurring, we will ask for fiscal records and participant file records, and then those records will be compared to each other. So your fiscal should have the same records that are in a participant file to which they use to make payment, and then therefore request reimbursement from us. So Andrea has a question regarding document or approval saying it's a support animal. Like, you're really getting into a topic that's related to the landlord and how you help that person to bring their pet or support animal into the apartment. It has nothing to do with the assistance that they're being provided for home ARP. So you should obviously help somebody who has an emotional support animal and is looking to apply for housing to help them navigate that reasonable accommodation request. Yes. Oh, thank you. Faith is reading my mind because I said I think it would be really great if there was some reasonable accommodation information that is shared here. High Plains Fair Housing is exactly where I go. Also, while I've got a way to put a plug in as well, and DHFAs, how are we doing for time? We're running out, are we not? Holy cow.
Yeah, we're doing awesome though. We've got just about 8 minutes left.
Okay, real quick. Some resources that we have on our website is also some articles related to servicing companion animals, requesting a reasonable accommodation. We also support going to High Plains Fair Housing at any time as well. I also want you to be aware on this website some search engines for finding rental housing. I really do like the Google search and apartments.com, but if you're looking for some resources as far as any HUD apartments that are affordable, or MFPs, rural development has rental assistance as well. So something that I want you to understand though, if Burleigh County doesn't have any, that's hilarious. What's Stutsman County? If you are helping somebody navigate to housing and this housing is in USDA rural developments, it's likely to have rental assistance tied to it. So you cannot help pay rental assistance, but you surely can help them get into this apartment. Okay. You just cannot duplicate benefits. Right. So if you're helping somebody get into an apartment that has rental assistance tied to it, wonderful. That is a long-term solution for that person, and you should do that. But you cannot pay rental assistance on that apartment. Questions? Is there anything that Holly, Safari, or Andrea feel I left out?
No, I don't think so. I think this is everything we had hoped to accomplish today. Jen, while you still have your screen up, Faith, would you mind deploying that poll, that second poll. And while Faith is doing that, Nika, your question, so we could help someone on Section 8 get into their unit with deposit, but just not their rent once they're established.
Yeah,
Correct.
so the use with other subsidies is specifically that financial assistance for rent and utilities cannot be provided to a program participant who's receiving the same type of assistance, except for a one-time payment of rental arrears if they got behind on their portion. But so financial assistance does include let me see here. I'm gonna bring up a little thing. I
When
got
Andy
that picture.
help, Andy Rent Help was a thing, we got caught a few times where the client didn't tell us they were getting rental assistance from ND Rent Help, and then we also paid with another funding source. So we have to be super duper careful, like that we check ledgers to see if anyone else is paying on their rent, because sometimes clients don't tell you the whole truth.
Right.
Good point.
We just need a few more answers plugged in, and then we can publish the results of the poll.
I did put in the chat, you all don't have access to the SharePoint site for Home ARP yet because it's not done. But you will be able to find all the form, policy documents, additional resources, links to the High Plains for Housing on the SharePoint site. You will be added to it, and then I'll provide like a brief tour of like how it works on December 17th when we talk about CAP 60.
Faith, do you want to show a quick screenshot of it? Now, it's in development, but if you would.
I can. I'm
Okay.
in it.
Yeah, Jen, do you want to take your screen down, and then
Yep.
Faith can just show us kind of a snippet. And then folks, if you haven't filled out the poll yet, please do so. And then Faith will bring up her SharePoint so we can see it's a work in progress. So this is not a final product.
Yeah, so this is just to let you know that like it's not gonna just be like a whole document library of every form and you have to go and find the number and a list of a bunch of other numbers. We are breaking it down into sections based on Holly's checklist. So the intake section, which we'll go through on the 17th, you can see like these are the intake forms, these are the incomes forms, here are fair housing resources. So it's going to be broken down very logically. Hopefully it's easy for you guys to navigate. These links, so these forms that are HUD forms, forms that Housing Finance provided to us, anything that Holly didn't create, they're links to the actual site. So if it's updated, the link should still work. So yeah, that's what it looks like. That's where I'm at. Sorry, there's not a ton to show. It's a little bit ways away from being done yet.
I think it's beautiful, Faith. Love it. Folks are going to be able to navigate that quite comfortably. So thank you so much. Faith, could you publish the poll and we'll kind of see get a pulse on how we're doing here? The results look really great. Can you see them on everybody else's end now?
It should be.
Okay, perfect. So we're getting there. And I know some folks are still feeling a little uncomfortable. Don't worry, we're making progress. We got lots of resources. And the reason we asked about doc management is after we went through all of these forms together, we were like, gosh, like, should we try to expedite getting things up in doc management? But we won't be able to do it without help. So for those that indicated you're willing to help out, and what we mean by that is like help getting it up and running, testing things with us, just lending support so we could help kind of get away from the paper and be more paperless sooner rather than later. But thank you, Faith. You can take that down, and really want to thank Jen and
Maybe before we hang up, I do want to answer one question that was asked in the chat related to the Section 8 and the deposit. And then there was a follow-up question in there because of the
Okay, yep,
utility
sorry.
provider, and it's an important question here. So
Jen, I didn't
So-
see that, so thank you.
yeah, well, so here's what the guidance that we received from ESG said, and it is that if the household meets the criteria and is not receiving assistance with a security deposit from another public source, then you can cover the cost of that security deposit. What is so secondary is related to utility. So the public assistance is not helping them pay their utilities. So that is not a duplication of subsidy. The subsidy is rental assistance. That's what we cannot duplicate. But we can help them with other aspects that are not covered by other public assistance. So if they are paying their rent with public Section 8, and then the utility assistance is what you determine is necessary to help them maintain their stability, that's fine. You just cannot duplicate benefits.
Thank
So-
you. That's very clear. Thank you. Thank you.
You know, one thing I thought of too was if somebody's on LIHEAP and we're assisting with utilities.
That is duplication.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Definitely need to know.
Sarah Hasbergen?
I just have a quick question, and only because you're the expert, Jen, because I've always wondered this question. Why is it duplication paying their portion the month of, but not when it's arrears?
So it has to do with the fact that that arrears part of them not keeping up with that. If they don't pay that arrears, they're going to face eviction. So it's more so a prevention of their eviction.
Sure. So the priority changes.
Yeah,
Kind
the
of.
priority changes a little bit
Got
to
it.
get them to be able to maintain their housing, and that's the only way that you can clear that.
Got it.
I was
That's
told
my
that
best
was-
guess because I did not write that exception because I thought that was strange too. Like, if you're
Yeah.
not going to let you help keep current, why are we allowed to help if they're in the past due?
Mm-hmm.
But it's part of that resolution.
Okay. And
You
did
know-
you say our utilities are allowable for people, not deposits, but actual utilities? If they're
Yes,
on a,
as long as so if the utilities are not being paid for by another public assistance, then that is allowable to help them with.
okay, so the utility allowance doesn't matter in that.
Well, that's a good question.
Oh, I almost didn't say it. Don't pretend you didn't hear anything.
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I keep hearing, like, I'm gonna go back to when we asked the question, and the question is, if the household is not receiving duplication of assistance. So is there anybody helping them to pay those utilities that they're required to be responsible for? No. Right?
I think
What if they
can't
get
it
find
depends on the voucher. I think sometimes the vouchers with that utility allowance, if they're at 0, sometimes they'll get a little bit.
Yeah, there's some
Um,
housing authority vouchers that they'll specify, like if the household is receiving like a check or an allowance that they're supposed to pay with utilities. It doesn't usually cover all of it, or I guess it depends on the voucher. But in that case, I'm assuming that if the housing authority has approved them for some kind of utility allowance, that we can't touch any other remaining amount of that utility.
that would be accurate. Yep.
Could we do arrears though? Utility arrears? Sorry, Jen.
That's okay. I would think that it would be the same thing that's applicable to the but for one-time payment of that arrears is allowable, just like it would be if it for that tenant's portion that way. Yeah, that's true.
Okay, that sounds good.
So, sometimes when I answer those questions, I have to say it still depends, guys, and it depends on the overall picture of that tenant. So just like Nika said, sometimes the voucher letter says that the tenant is responsible for a portion of something related to utilities, then you can't touch it, right? So anytime I say, yeah, you could cover it. If it's not clear, let's pause and just make sure that you are paying for eligible things and you've got the whole picture. And sometimes people leave things out of the conversation. And so you might have to dig a little further just to make sure if it's not clear. We get a lot of questions about legal fees too. Court-ordered legal fees are allowable. Just got to have proof of what that is. And it has to be a cost to resolve their crisis, right? Their barrier to housing. I haven't seen too many people struggle to get the court-ordered legal fee documentation, so it must be pretty easy to get or something, because there's a lot of legal fees that get paid out at USG and North Dakota Homeless Grant. So
That's
I
only
think
for
we could-
paying the one-time arrears, the rental arrears. That can't be, for current rent.
court-ordered legal fees. Which is not the same as legal assistance, by the way. That's part of the arrears. That's right. Anything else?
Jen, thank you so much. Thank you and Bridget for all the work you put into this. Jen will send me a copy of her slides and I will get that out to everybody. Reminder that we're together again Tuesday, December 10th. We're going to dive into we're going to dive into policy discussion. And then on the 17th, we'll dive into CAP 60 and all kinds of good stuff. So thank you so much, everybody. Keep up the great work. Please remember to complete those visual assessment trainings if you are on the list. Remember to visit those pre-training resources. You have an obligation here, friends. You don't get to get into the program and say, nobody told me. We're telling you now. You got to read those things. So thank you and have an amazing day, and we'll see you all on the 10th. Bye-bye.